So I would like to move on to indeed the roundtable and quickly introduce you to Robert Kooloos. He is currently leading within Capgemini the Netherlands our e-commerce practice. Of course, Frank will be joining again, and we have also Aren joining us. Aren is one of our technology experts in the field of e-commerce, and we're also happy to welcome our special guest Ivo Bronsveld, who is head of integrations at commercetools. Guys, can you quickly tell a little bit more about what exactly you do in your daily jobs and around e-commerce specifically?
Yes, okay, I will start. I will keep it very short. I'm a digital strategist and commerce lead within Capgemini in the Netherlands.
Okay.
Yeah, I already introduced myself, but from Kreeke, I'm working very close together with Robert. But my main focus is more on the delivery of these platforms.
And Aren?
Yep, I'm Aren Roy. I'm a cloud solution architect at Capgemini, mainly focused on commerce and other implementations in Microsoft Azure Cloud.
Okay, and finally our special guest, Ivo. Ivo, you're on mute.
I'm unmuted. There we go. Ivo, I'm head of integrations at commercetools, which means that I'm responsible for all things to do with third-party integration. So Composable Commerce is what I do every day.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you all for this short introduction. Before we continue with this roundtable, I would like to point out to our viewers who are watching us live that they can actually ask questions both on Twitch and YouTube, and we'll try to address them during this roundtable if possible. So we have been listening to the introduction from Frank about what we think composable commerce is. But I'm interested, Robert, for example, what do you think are, let's say, what's the key benefit for you of taking this kind of approach and building e-commerce solutions?
I think the key benefit in my view is the problems that it brings around bringing more speed and adaptability to the modern enterprise. In the sense that you need to be able to properly respond to the ever-accelerating change in the marketplace these days. And with COVID, I think change is going even faster than we were already used to. And next to that, I think the change that is going on with the digital technologies that are available these days, that is raising also the bar in customer expectations, which will make sure that you need to properly respond and able to keep on being innovative to stay relevant towards the end customers and to bring value to the end customers.
Okay.
And if we look at that, and then I think it's being the composable commerce part is helping to bring speed both on the front end side. Brings speed towards the different heads that can be decoupled from the backend logic, and therefore you will be able to bring in new heads more easily, and it also is independent. You can also release independently from the logic in the backend part because you are building on top of these APIs. And then on the backend side, you have, as Frank already explained, you might have either packaged business capabilities from the different commerce vendors in the market or the different MACH vendors in the market. And next to that, you can also build your own bespoke microservices, which will really differentiate you from your competition. And I think that together it brings that you have a very flexible system, a very adaptable system with small teams that can, for example, focus on certain packaged business capabilities or on certain microservices, and they are really self-sufficient and autonomous. It's more the feature teams that are responsible from the customer experience up until the database, and therefore they can also release independently from the other teams.
Okay. Yeah, great answer, of course. Very elaborate. Thank you. Same question, maybe from a more technical point of view for Aren. What do you think are, let's say, in this approach, the key benefits, or at least for you the most important benefit?
Yeah, so composable at the core of composable commerce is of course a composable application, and with an composable application approach, we see more and more that there is a whole decoupled nature of the front end that Robert mentioned, and that is becoming more and more an enabler or an accelerator for this approach. So backend capabilities, you can develop them independent or even launch them independent of the front end. So it gives you more flexibility on how fast you can bring features to your customers, for example. So, and if you tie that with, let's say, the kind of capabilities you can buy or rent from large vendors in the market, if you tie it all together, you have a plethora of options that opens up for you from a composable commerce perspective.
Yep. Okay. Thank you for that answer. And also, I'm going to close with this question with Ivo, but Frank, you first. What are your thoughts?
Maybe a little bit more practical example, because today is Tuesday, and that means in the Netherlands there's again a press conference at 7 about the corona, and I think maybe 6-7 weeks ago, or maybe even longer, there was such a press conference as well, where they announced that all the stores they needed to close, that they could only do click and collect. And one of our customers, which is on such composable commerce architecture, of course they're a little bit longer already on the journey, but yeah, they were able to have within one sprint to support click and collect through all their stores. And yeah, even the business there, they were quite amazed with how fast such a change could be implemented. So that's really a practical example of how agile you can be, and how fast new features and value drivers can be implemented.
Okay, and finally, from a more product perspective, let's say, Ivo, what's your take on this?
Yeah, so I think composable commerce for us as a vendor is also a very important part, because it also enables our customers to migrate to our platform in a, let's say, a more granular way, right? You can start by just doing things like cards and checkout, and then slowly migrating towards the entire platform, or migrating other parts to other systems, right? So I think it also makes it a lot more easy and a lot more powerful to do the migration. So rather than having to do the big bang, you can just gradually migrate to a commerce platform, and then mix and match whatever services you would need at any point in time. So that's one angle, I would say, on top of the fact that there's just certain solutions that have dedicated solutions for things like payments or order management that might just be needed for certain customer requirements.
Yeah, true. Yeah, so indeed, that's sort of like the red line through all the answers that I've been hearing so far, that it's indeed really about moving from this situation in the past where e-commerce were these large kind of monolithic platforms where you had to do everything all at once, while now we're getting into, let's say, a more microservices / cloud native kind of e-commerce world, where indeed step by step you can transition to solutions such as, of course, commercetools. So interesting to hear that from you guys, and actually that triggers me, because I myself, I've been very fortunate to also work in an e-commerce environment where we moved from essentially from also such a big monolith towards a microservices / cloud native world, which seems to be like the foundation for the composable commerce. But if we look at this transition, let's say, what are like the things that we're seeing in the industry when companies and when organizations start to move in that direction, and especially also for commerce, what kind of patterns, again, for you, maybe Ivo, do you see happening there?
Yeah, so I think the big part there, right, around everything is that you do need to have the infrastructure, and I think that was also mentioned in the intro, like not so much the infrastructure necessarily as like cloud infrastructure or, you know, but also just you need to have the organization ready to do this kind of transition. So that is, I think, an incredibly important part that's sometimes overlooked, that you need to have a bit of the, let's say, knowledge or experience to build a composable architecture and make the most of it. Like there's plenty of customers that are considering this, but in the end, it might be, you know, not for them because it requires a lot of adaptation and, you know, kind of new technologies they might have to learn, or new DevOps procedures that they're not aware of that, you know, that make it harder for them to do. So I think there's a lot of prerequisites in a way to figure out. But once you're there, that's when things really start accelerating and become incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's also my personal experience. You know, first focus on how you bring the agility to your organization itself.
Yeah.
And then adjust, of course, your architecture and your technology to it. But start there. But still,
yeah, I would definitely say it's not a technical problem, right? It's more of an organization problem.
True. But still, maybe Arjen, if you hear this transition also, what from your experience are like the, you know, maybe more technical kind of challenges that you also see happening?
I think I concur with Ivo. So from an organizational maturity, that's the primary step, because if you try to directly jump into a composable enterprise application space, yeah, you probably run into more problems than what you are solving. So you should take small steps. So for some organizations, if you, let's say, already have an established microservices kind of architecture, you should probably try to build on your build your own solutions on that slowly, and let's say for the more specialized stuff, you could rely on vendors that provide, let's say, the best practice capabilities for the features you're looking at. So try to find the right mix of what you build in-house versus what you can get from the market.
Yep. And Robert, do you also have a take on this?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Ivo and Arjen are saying about this topic. And what I would like to add is that in the end, when I'm advising my clients on where they need to move next, I think it's always about the customer experience. So what is this helping the customer experience to be improved? Yes or no? And where are the big bottlenecks within this customer experience currently? If for example, I had a client that was doing quite well with their platform, but one of the things that was underperforming and was not on par with the expectations of their customers was their search and merchandising capability. So then we focused on that part first, and we selected the best possible solution for them, and we were able to improve the search and the discovery capabilities for the customers to find the right products for what they really need. And then it's bringing real value again to the end customers. I think from that angle, yeah, you can take this approach, and then if you are swapping out the search capability from the monolithic platform, for example, you are already in you're already going towards a more composable architecture, and it's you're following a strangler pattern. I think a lot of the audience we recognize this pattern.
Yeah, definitely. So this is indeed also from my personal experience very recognizable. There is it's one of the things that I always see happening, that there's a tendency that when you start talking about microservices, that we think that people start to think in custom software development terms. These are custom developed microservices. While I think you also, let's say, for the functionality that it provides, should ask yourself, can I actually also purchase this? Can I also get such a piece of functionality or API that it exposes from a commercial vendor, and maybe thereby saving me a lot of challenges that I would otherwise have to take up myself. Search is always, of course, a famous example where you can go the Elasticsearch route and build it all yourself, or or maybe even further down the stack and take Lucene itself? Or do you go with something like Bloomreach or Threadhopper, the usual suspects, or a more, cloud native kind of solution such as Algolia? We got a great question actually from the audience that helps us bring in the remaining 5 minutes of this roundtable to what we already talked about in preparing this roundtable as well. It's like, okay, what are like the challenges that we are we seeing? So it's indeed the question from Utval, I hope I pronounced his first name correctly, Kumartoda, who asked us like, okay, what are the top 5 mistakes? Now, given time, I don't think we can. Let's let everybody just mention one mistake because we're with the 5 of us. So, what do you think are key mistakes, Frank?
And maybe not a key mistake, but I think what you should not forget is when you build stuff on cloud native, it really helps if you already have capabilities within your company to do that. Some companies they more or less adopted this cloud first, so they try to rationalize all their applications and build them on the cloud. But there you see building on the cloud, it's completely different than building something else. So if you already have capabilities and experience, that would really help as an accelerator to build such a platforms. So there's also some customers maybe that have more, let's say, SaaS solutions, and they don't necessarily have these cloud COEs or cloud first strategy. Then it can add some, let's say, more complexity, because the way how we build on the cloud is completely different. And I think that's one of my key takeaways, that if you have those capabilities, that would really help already to set up such an architecture.
Okay, and what about you, Arin? What do you think what kind of mistakes do you bump into?
Yeah, I think when we talk composable, we also talk microservices, and then it's all about domain-specific services and how you, let's say, distribute your data. So a data model is quite core to how you set up your application or your commerce platform. So make good decisions there, and try to keep them as domain-specific as possible, so that you have more flexibility when you have to switch a service over with something else or a better service at a later time.
And Robert, what do you think is a frequent mistake made from your experience?
Maybe also to add on the point that Aaron was making, because I think the data is really important, and getting the data out, especially when you're working with the large enterprises where you have a lot of different business units, a lot of different brands operating in different countries. Then you also have different ERP systems and systems of records where all the data resides, product data or pricing data, or also the customer data, and you need to get that into the front end and into the composable commerce architecture. That's sometimes something that is being underestimated. What I've noticed.
Okay. And then finally, Ivo, your take on this.
Yeah, and I'm going to combine this with some of the other great comments that I've seen in the chat come by. I think one of the biggest things that I would advise people to do, so rather than saying the top 5 mistake, I would say, please try to keep it small in the beginning, right? So don't start with that big bang. Keep it small, try things out, see if you can take one part, like whether that is the product catalog or maybe the checkout process and shopping carts and stuff. Start with that, do a POC, try it out. I think that's also, to the other question, a great way to convince the senior stakeholders in your organization to just show that it can work, right? And definitely leverage all the things that you already have and try to migrate slowly, and only when it makes sense. You shouldn't have to migrate everything all at once, definitely not at once, but also at different times. You might say, this works perfectly well, let's keep it where it is. So I think that's the key of composable, right? That you can do things whenever it makes sense, and if it doesn't, don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree on that. That's actually how we did it also at the client that I'm currently working for, and from my own experience, when we started migrating towards a microservices architecture, you basically look at the customer journey that you want to provide to your customers. You identify the steps that the customer is going through, and then step by step, essentially, you start to carve out your microservices, and then one by one, step by step, you start actually building them, and actually also template by template. And what I mean by that is that we indeed also said, like, okay, let's first start with a simple content page, not even a real, not even something like the product detail page or the product listed page, but a simple content page first, see how that works out. Start with a new front end, and then from there on, we started moving towards the listers and the product detail page and search. And then at the same time, in parallel, we had a separate team that was starting on the checkout and the My Account. The challenge that, from my experience, then also rises, which actually also taps into the question raised again by Uvo. I hope I still pronounce it. Kumar about, should it be better to get your APIs directly at the ERP ecosystem or from the ERP ecosystem? Could be. It of course always depends, but from my experience, it turned out to be very difficult to actually build our own APIs on top of our, for example, product master data management system. I'm actually working for a retailer at the moment, and yeah, your product master data is basically your catalog, and that turned out to be very difficult to make a performing and stable API on it, even while we were not actually tapping into the database of the MDM system itself. We were making a copy of it in a low latency database, in this case DynamoDB from AWS, and then have our own custom built API on top of it, and it was still difficult to come up with a nice performance distribution, which is very challenging to keep under control. And by that I mean, like, okay, how is your first 50% of calls to such an API performing, and then the other 75, and so forth, until you get to the always difficult 95% onwards. So that was my experience, and I think that there you really need to be keen on loosely coupling your ERP systems in terms of trying to make it event driven. If something changed with regard to a product or price in one of those systems, let it send an event that your e-commerce environment can respond to, and then store whatever is needed into its own e-commerce fast databases. Okay, looking at the time, we are running out of time for this roundtable, because we have a great presentation now waiting from Ashish, who is going to further deep dive into commercetools. But before I do that, I would like to thank all our panelists for sharing their views. I see a lot of additional questions being raised in the chat. We'll try to address them as well. But again, for now, thank you. And it's